For the second part of the multi-use server build that I'm working on in the Darkbase Pro 900, we'll be installing the ProArt X570 Creator Wi-Fi from Asus. When it comes to choosing a motherboard, you really should be looking at more what feature set it comes with more than anything else. So how many USB ports does it have? How many PCI Express slots does it have? And what are you going to be using it for? So this board has all the features that I want, and we'll get into those shortly. But one of the main reasons I chose this board was primarily because of how it'll look aesthetically in this build. I didn't want to do any RGB in this build, so I really wanted to stick with components that don't have RGB or don't really rely on RGB as part of their aesthetic. So the Asus X570 ProArt Creator kind of meets all of those requirements. It has a nice boxy look that kind of matches with the RTX 3090, and it kind of has a very basic layout and no RGB. The most important thing for me for this build was I kind of went a little bit crazy on my RGB on my last build, and I really wanted to focus on just getting the performance and a non-RGB aesthetic. So this X570 motherboard from Asus really is fairly basic as far as how it looks, but it still has a really nice aesthetic to it. It's got this kind of acrylic ProArt display overlay on top of the heatsink, which we'll have to see how that performs as far as cooling, because that does cut off some of the airflow. But it also comes with 3 M.2 PCIe slots. For now, I'll only be using 1 slot, but having the ability to expand into 2 more is something that I really enjoy having. Each of the slots come with their own M.2 heatsinks. With a lot of Asus boards, like the Asus TUF boards, they don't come with heatsinks for every slot. So this is a nice touch, and it just kind of brings it all together so that it's the same consistent aesthetic throughout the board. The board itself is actually really heavy, and a lot heavier than other boards that I've held in the past, and that seems to be because of all of the really thick heavy metal that they have along the power distribution for this board. So that gives me a lot of confidence that this board is going to have no problem providing a lot of voltage for the CPU if I want to do overclocking, or even if I just want to optimize the settings for rendering performance. Let's talk really quickly about the feature set of the board, what it comes with that is making it more attractive for me. This board comes with 2 Thunderbolt 4 ports, which are capable of 40 gigabits per second. And that's pretty awesome because a 3.2 Gen 2 USB port is only capable of 10 gigabits per second. So that effectively quadruples the speed of what I'm able to get out of a Thunderbolt 4 port versus a USB 3.2 Gen 2 port. Now the board also comes with 4 USB 3.2 Gen 2 ports at 10 gigabits per second, which is great for most devices. It comes with 4 USB 3.2 Gen 1 ports, which are limited to 5 gigabits per second. And again, that's more than enough for most things, and that'll be used for things like my peripherals, mouse, keyboard, those kinds of things that don't require high-speed USB ports. The motherboard also supports 1 front USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type-C connector. It also supports 1 USB 3.2 Gen 1 header to support multiple USB ports on the front of the computer that'll run at 5 gigabits per second. It also supports 3 USB 2 type headers for the front USB as well. And it also supports up to 6 additional USB 2.0 ports. Now for me, I don't really use USB 2.0. The speeds are pretty slow, but again, mouse, keyboard, and some other peripherals, 2.0 is more than enough. And for wireless and Bluetooth, it comes with Bluetooth 5.2, which is one of the latest revisions of Bluetooth and works compatible backwards with most Bluetooth devices. It also comes with a 2x2 Wi-Fi 6E. So devices supporting Wi-Fi 6 also require a Wi-Fi 6 router to connect to, or Wi-Fi 6 wireless access point. And I don't have Wi-Fi 6 in my home yet, but this might just be the thing that I need to push me to upgrading my network. So the motherboard also does come with graphics connectors, and that's so that if you did want to run integrated graphics, you could, but we'll be running with an RTX 3090, so we won't need to make use of that functionality, but it's nice to have just in case you do want to use this for a future project. I used to use dedicated sound cards for better audio quality, but I found that most of the onboard cards are more than sufficient for anything that I'm going to be using them for. This motherboard comes with a 7.1 surround Realtek chipset, and really, it's integrated audio. Realtek offers good value when it comes to onboard audio, and again, onboard audio is good enough for anything that I'm going to be doing, and if I really want to do any professional audio capture, I'm going to be putting an expansion card in anyways. So for me, Ethernet functionality was really important. I'm currently in the process of looking at what it's going to take to upgrade my home network to 10 gig. In order to do that, I also want motherboards and components that can take advantage of 10 gig, otherwise it's a waste of money. The Asus ProArt X570 Creator comes with a Marvell 10 gigabit per second chipset, as well as a 2.5 gigabit per second Intel chipset. So I can use the 10 gig to connect to other devices in my network, as well as the 2.5 gig to do any interconnectivity that I want between systems. So this board actually has kind of the best of both worlds. It has the 10 gig and the 2.5 gig, and it's one of the first boards that I've personally used in one of my builds that doesn't come with a standard 1 gig Ethernet. I'm slowly getting the sense that more and more computer manufacturers are going to be moving away from 1 gig and moving towards higher 2.5 and 10 gig chipsets. Some of the internet service providers in my area are already starting to offer 2.5 gig internet as well as 10 gig internet. So not only are we going to start looking at the hardware changing, but that means that your average consumer is also going to have to upgrade their switches, their routers, their hubs, their wireless access points, as well as any of the other devices in their home that connect at 1 gig if they want to really take advantage of that 2.5 gig internet. So with this motherboard, at least I'm future-proofed when it comes to moving my internet to a 2.5 gig internet plan. The motherboard also comes with 3 full-length PCI Express slots. That's really important to me because I'm going to be using an Elgato capture card in order to capture video from my other system on this system for when I want to do things like streaming. That way I can get the full use out of my 3090 in my main system and do all my encoding and transcoding on my 3090 in my streaming box. Now, of course, the minute that I actually use both slots, we're going to lose our X16 speed and we're going to drop to X8. But because it's PCI Express 4.0, it doesn't really matter. An RTX 3090 won't fully saturate an X8 slot anyways, and you might gain 1 or maybe 2% of performance by running on a pure PCI Express X16 lane. The performance is going to be just fine for our application, as this isn't a gaming-centric rig. This is around more content creation, streaming, and other things that we're going to be doing, like hosting video game servers, doing 3D rendering, and other things that this little thing is going to be doing for us. So this build is going to be powered by a Ryzen 9 5900X. And so today I want to get the CPU into the system, get the motherboard mounted into the system, and start getting everything connected so that I can move forward with getting this up and running. And then it's just a matter of waiting for some of the other parts that I have on order to come in so that I can complete this build and start putting it to good use. So for the RAM, we went with G.Skill Ripjaws. We went with the CL14 kit that runs at 14, 14, 1434. And I'm really curious to see what kind of performance I can get over the CL14 that I'm getting currently with my main build with CL18. For the main OS drive, I chose the Western Digital SN850 Black. I've been using the black as my main OS drive in my main build, and quite frankly, it's one of the best performing M.2s that you can get on the market. There are some that tout higher performance or higher throughput, but in my opinion, you can't go wrong with a Western Digital Black drive. And I like to use these. I use the Western Digital Blues as a reliable budget device, and I like to use the Blacks as a performance device. So for the CPU cooler, I wanted to go with the Noctua NH-D15S. The D15 has 2 fans, the S has 1. It's essentially the same cooler. The performance with the single fan versus the dual fan is almost negligible, and quite frankly, I think it looks a little bit better with just the single fan. Now with my goal of no RGB, this helps me achieve that goal. Because I'm using the Darkbase Pro 900, I was tempted to go with the Darkrock Pro 4 cooler, just to kind of keep the Be Quiet theme, but ultimately I've used the NH-D15S in a lot of builds. I like its cooling performance, and once this build is done, I actually want to use it to do a number of different thermal tests with a handful of different performance thermal pastes that I like to use. So I'm going to go ahead and get this installed onto the CPU, and of course that means I have to get some thermal paste. And the thermal paste I've been using a lot lately is the Thermalright TFX paste. I find that the TFX paste just performs and outperforms just about any thermal paste that I've used in the past. But I do want to use this build as an opportunity to test a number of different thermal pastes to ultimately test which one we should use when we want the best performance for our systems. All right, and there it is. And I want to kind of say thank you to Noctua for doing the Chromex Black editions. That's a big help. I was never a huge fan of the Noctua Beige, although it was great for branding. This is much better for build aesthetics. All right, so with everything installed on the motherboard, now we're ready to install it in the case. One thing I do recommend is plugging in the CPU cables for the motherboard in the top left corner of the board prior to getting the board mounted in the case. Sometimes getting these cables plugged in can be hard enough as it is, let alone when it's mounted in a case and you have no room to move around. So that's something that I've kind of started doing just to ensure that the install goes smoothly. And I'm not kind of creeping in there with my hands, or I don't have to get small children with small hands to come and try to fit that into the motherboard. All right, now we got the motherboard and graphics card put in. You can kind of kind of get a feel for the look I'm going for here. So we're going for very simplistic, very basic, no RGB, and I think overall this case really complements the RTX 3090 as well as the ProArt motherboard. The only thing that really kind of sticks out is the G.Skill memory, but it's got a little bit of red in there, but we're probably not going to see that once we get the case on and put the tempered glass panel on the side. Now we got to get the power set up, get everything installed so that we can install Windows, and we're going to be installing Windows 11. I'm not using Windows 11 for my main production system right now, simply because I don't want the problems that come with being an early adopter of a new OS. So I thought, what a better time to try Windows 11. So I'll end the video there for today, and in the next video, we'll install Windows, we'll get everything set up, kind of set some early benchmarks and baselines for the performance of the CPU and the GPU, and then we'll look at how we can squeeze a little bit more performance out of this system. So that's it for part 2 of this build, looking at the X570 ProArt Creator Wi-Fi from Asus. And in our next video, we'll get everything slapped together, run some tests, set some early benchmarks, and see if we can't squeeze a little more performance out of this system. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next video.